from Stanton House. Welcome to Cyber Go-to-Market Girl Talk, the go-to podcast for women in cyber. During this series, we will be exploring the background of female go-to-market leaders in cybersecurity vendors. And I'm delighted and honoured to be joined on this series by 7 successful females to hear about how they got to where they are today and the challenges they overcame in doing so. I hope you enjoy the series, and if you would like the opportunity to feature on future seasons, please do get in touch. Thanks for listening. I look forward to sharing each episode with you bi-weekly. I'm delighted to be joined by my 5th guest, Lara Meadows, the VP of Sales Engineering at Threat Connect, a threat intelligence platform provider that fuses intelligence, automation, orchestration, and response to enable organizations to be more proactive and efficient. Lara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be your number 5.
I'm really excited to have you, and I have to say I'm particularly excited about this particular episode with you because this is the first episode where we're actually getting to introduce an executive in female in cyber who blends both not only some of the commercial aspects but also the technical expertise as well. And I think that's even more of a minority when you start pulling in some of the engineering piece. I'm sure the statistics get marginally lower. So very excited to have this conversation with you. So I'll take a breath for a second. I'd love to hand over to you to introduce yourself. You've obviously had an incredibly progressive career, originally working at some of the larger organisations, instantly recognisable names in the field, and then taking your expertise to some of the smaller firms. So tell me a little bit about your career journey and your background.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this and to talk, and I love the topic of female, especially engineers. In cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is its own niche, and then you have the added element of being a female in cybersecurity, and then an engineer, right? There's just not many, and so I'm excited, I'm passionate to talk about this subject. I'm Lara Meadows, like you said. I live in the DC area. I studied engineering, industrial and systems engineering in college, and actually, I know I don't look it, but I'm old enough that when I first came out of college, cybersecurity was a whole new genre. And so my first job out of college, I was working for a government contractor and got pulled over onto this team. And the boss that I was working for, he said, hey, come join. And I said, I don't know what cybersecurity is. And he said, trust me, you're going to want to be a part of it. And from that moment on, I mean, he sealed my career, because from then on, I was tied to cybersecurity and focused on cybersecurity. And so over the years, I have had this kind of progression, maybe intentional, maybe unintentional, where I go work for a small company, a startup, and get bought out by a big company. So then, do that for a little while, then go back to the small company thing, and then get bought out by a big company. And so by way of acquisitions, I've worked with some pretty big companies, like you said. So, I mean, to name, McAfee, Symantec, Cisco, HP. So I've had a lot of exposure in big companies, but then also the dynamics of small companies, and really enjoy both for different aspects and different reasons.
Wow, amazing. Well, it's great to hear your story. And it's really refreshing to hear that earlier on that you were exposed to, I guess, the cyber world and the kind of engineering space. And I think I noted that one of the things that I love about your background is that you've obviously, as you've referenced, you've got a Bachelor of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering. And again, that's something that is very rare to see. We'd love to see more of it. But yeah, tell me a little bit about, I guess, you stepping into the STEM world during education from so early on. Is it something that was ingrained in you from a much younger age, or how did you kind of get into that?
So my dad was he was in the military and was an officer and was an electrical engineer. He went to West Point. So I kind of grew up with a dad who was in military intelligence. It's interesting, maybe again subliminally. This was infused in me because he did military intelligence, so it's all the secret stuff, and my big joke with my dad used to always be, hey, Dad, can you tell me what you do? And he was like, maybe in 20 years, but maybe not at all, and so he kept saying, you know what, you don't have the clearances for me to be able to tell you what I do. And so I was like, okay, so it was interesting that when I went to college, I love math. I've always loved math. And so when I went to college, I decided to go into engineering just because it seemed to me that was a big part of it. And then once I got to the school that I went to, Virginia Tech, I ended up, it was great because the program you got in, I actually originally wanted to go in with aerospace engineering. I love the idea of that. And then when I went in, the first year that you're there in college, they just put you in as a general engineer, and then they give you exposure to all the different types of engineering. And so industrial and systems came out, and I had to take a class in there, and I was like, I kind of dig this because it was this fusion of engineering and business. I used to say it's engineering with a business tag is the best way to describe it. And so it just made sense to stick with that, to do that because I really enjoyed the classes. And then when I graduated again, went to work for a company and then got pulled into the cyber world. And so again, with my dad's background, my first job out of college, I got a clearance, and my dad, I came home, and he was like, "Hey, so can you tell me what you're doing?" And I was like, "Sorry, Dad, you don't have the clearance." And so he goes, "Okay." And I said, "Let me tell you the unclassified side." And I proceed to tell him, and he goes, "Here's what you're doing." Boom, boom, boom. And I was like,
Oh, we knew.
totally new. So.
Oh no, I love that. And do you remember when you were then in college studying engineering from a ratio perspective, obviously not the specifics, but was it predominantly male or did you have a lot of other females that were also on the course?
Definitely predominantly male. I would say in my specific engineering curriculum, there were probably more females, more of a balanced ratio. I won't even say balanced, but like a third women to two-thirds. I will tell you though, I had one experience in college that stood out to me, and it's probably one of my biggest regrets that I didn't handle it better. But I had an electrical engineering professor. I went to go ask him for help, and he said to me, he goes, "You're at a disadvantage being a female." He said, "Had you known," or he goes, "if you were a male, you would have been hung out with your dad under the car, learned how to work cars, da, da, da." And it essentially insulted me because I was a female. And I was so taken aback that I just walked home back to my condo where we lived, stunned. And again, I wish I had to go back and just, there were so many different things that I would have said, but that was probably my first exposure. Like, oh, I'm different. Like being here, doing this. This is
That's
interesting.
It's insane that that was said, and I can imagine that, like you said afterwards, you wished you'd said X, Y, Z, and in the moment you were probably, I should imagine, so stumped to have someone literally say that to you, like you're at a disadvantage because you're female. It's really interesting, and yeah, no, I'm sorry to hear that that was an experience, but probably
I'll
one
tell
that
you,
shaped a lot of your thinking moving
it
forward.
did, and I'll tell you, it's one of those that's given me the ability to say it's okay to speak up sometimes and to be confrontative or dissent, and I think a lot of times being a female too, we can't be the mute that sits in the back and just, acquiesces and says yes, yes, yes. Sometimes you do have to sit right at the table, speak up and say, "Hey, can I offer a different opinion?" And so I think that was probably the first time where I was realized you should have spoken up. You should have said something.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. It's interesting because I think I've always said this, that all of this really stems from so much earlier on in education. And I can even think back to when I was at school, when I was doing what we call GCSEs in the UK. So I would have been about maybe 15, 16. And I was that very persistent person that was always kind of hounding their teachers. How am I doing? Give me the feedback. Can I tell me I want to be the best? I want to get an A. And when it came to classes like maths and science, one of my teachers during a science project said, you know, you'll get a B. You'll be fine. You'll walk a B. So kind of be content with that. And I was like, absolutely not. I have this pride thing. If someone tells me I can't do something, I literally. And you would have thought that as a teacher, they would have been more receptive. I've got this child here who's clearly like got this
Yes.
curiosity to learn. Why would you just sit there and tell me that I should be satisfied with a B? I got an A in the end because
Yay.
I made sure I'm quite a pest. So, but
Awesome.
yeah, I think it's definitely something for teachers to be mindful of as well as how they're actually encouraging their students and so forth. So yeah, it's a shame, but I recently read actually an article by a lady called Sarah Lofgren. She's the Channel Sales Engineering Manager at Silence, and in her article she concluded, and I quote, so I'm not Plagiarizing what she said. I quote, while it's anecdotal at best, I'll assert that about 1% of security sales engineers are women. I don't know that anyone has bothered to track it because we're so rare. We're more like a statistical anomaly than a measurable thing. Quote closed. What's your view on this, and why do you think that this is the case?
So it's interesting. I think 1% is probably a low number, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time. And in the beginning, I can't tell you the number of times that I'm sitting in a room looking around and I was like, oh, I'm the only female again. I mean, so many times. I do feel like in the last 5 to 7 years, that's changed and seeing more and more females. And I'm lucky that I have, as I've moved up in leadership too, been able to recruit more diverse teams. But also, I work with some pretty fabulous people who were women, and so to work with them and bring them over, that's it's been really good. And I'm part of this pre-sales organization, pre-sales collective, where there are so many women and so many people participating, and I would say there's a lot more than I ever would have thought. So I think that's an interesting statistic, but right now on my team, I'm the only female, so maybe it is 1% in my company.
Yeah, well, it sounds as though she was hazarding a guess, and to be fair, I think the article wasn't the most recent. It was probably a few years ago, but I think that's the point that she was probably trying to make, is that we're actually not entirely sure what the actual percentage is because nobody seems to really look into it. So it's really interesting. But I thought it was quite a good article to read. How you've obviously mentioned then that obviously in your position now as a VP, you've got the opportunity that when you're hiring you can consider diversity and making the process, I guess, more encouraging to females. So how do you think that companies can look to architect a recruitment track that encourages females to get into sales engineering earlier on in their career as opposed to kind of falling into it by accident?
So I'll tell you what, let me actually digress a teensy bit because where I spent my morning at my son's school, they were looking for coaches for a STEM fair that they did. And it was all these amazing kids who did STEM projects. And so I went over for a few hours and was a judge. And I was so happy. And honestly, it was whatever table was available. I went over to judge and divide and conquer. And there were several where it was females, girls, or just a single girl. And I was like, hey, do you love this? Is this, making you want to go into STEM? These are eighth graders, mind you, so they're not quite high schoolers, and they're definitely not thinking college yet. But I was like, does this interest you? And what was amazing to me was the diversity in answers. Like there were several groups that were like, oh my gosh, it was so exciting. I love this. It makes me love math. It makes me love science. And it makes me want to go do something, continuing to do this. And then there were a couple who were like, no, it actually deterred me from ever wanting to do something in STEM. So it was kind of funny just to see the very, very polar. But I do think it's important to start that early. So to give the kids the power, these ladies, the power to learn and expose themselves. And what's interesting is I was talking to one of them. I said, there's really different facets of engineering and STEM and things like that, not limited. But so where I go with that is that I think it's important to get that as early as you possibly can. And so I think that that's the important part. I think with companies, there's so many different companies that are doing so many different great things, right? There's women's networks. This is something we've done in our company where I've set up a group for us. We get together, we talk about things. I'll be honest, this week we're talking about a couple of Netflix shows that there's been a big dissension of. But we do like book clubs. We'll talk about different topics. How are you guys handling different types of things, And so I think to have communities like that, it draws people in. Also looking for talent, but I will tell you that's been the hardest thing. I've had I've hired a bunch of people, and the pool, there's no females. And not to say that I would automatically give it to a female who's coming in, but I would like to have a wider net that I can make a decision and look, for a more diverse. But it just seems that there's only a certain specific type of candidates that are finding, and maybe it's geographically, but whatever you can do, the earlier you can do it, is the best thing we can do.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there. So the first, obviously, is the education piece earlier on, and it sounds as though that was a great opportunity that you had to go into the school and speak with a variety of young children and kind of get their minds whirling over maths and science and so forth. And I think if that's something that can be maintained throughout, school and going into college, and maybe businesses actually taking, I don't know if it's something that is done out here, but I know there's like career fairs and things like that. But if businesses were maybe kind of more front-minded of when you go to various career fairs or go to schools or colleges or whatever, helping position the opportunity as being a sales engineer maybe seem more attractive to a female. And by that I mean things like, for example, I would maybe I would assume, before I knew about sales engineering, I would probably maybe assume that it's a man's world, and maybe you don't have as much flexibility as you would have liked, especially if you're a working mum or whatever it is. You have to travel here and there, and so it could be a case of really highlighting and being clear, hey, look, you can operate in a flexible environment. You can be a mum and you can also be a sales engineer. There are ways to work around you being able to, work from home or visit clients and so forth. So small things like that, tweaking the messaging on, like the job adverts and everything, so that it's just a little bit more inclusive and isn't necessarily targeting a specific type of person. Could be ways in which businesses could approach trying to get some more talent, into female talent, I guess, in this space.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I'll just, with sales engineering in general, it's such an interesting profession. I mean, quite honestly, it's the best job in the world, I will tell you. And anybody I talk to, recruiting, hiring, even just out in the world speaking about, I love our job because we have the best of all worlds. And the two big things that I like, well, the main thing is you get to wear like left brain, right brain hats. You get the aspect of using an engineer, solving a problem, being able to have some finished product at the end, and then you also get the salesy side where you get to be more creative and social and things like that. So I love it's this combination of using, left brain, right brain. But I also love that our role, we get to work with every single department pretty much within the company. So whether we're talking about engineering, whether we're talking about product, whether you're talking about marketing, documentation, HR, I mean, we're involved and touching everyone. And so it's this role that's interesting because people hear sales in front of it and they think, oh, it's a sales. And you're like, no, we're doing a lot more than that. So it's the best job out there. But to your point, what you were talking about, in my role personally, I think I've been working from home for 15 years. Mm-hmm. So having that flexibility, my oldest is now 19. Mm-hmm. So having that flexibility to be able to have those days and to say, I mean, I probably should admit this, but there was a time where I don't think some of the moms in my kids' school knew that I was a working mom because my job allowed me to go during the day and go pop into school and volunteer and be there. I was still banging out the hours, either early in the morning or late at night, a lot of times till 9 or 10 at night, and they were definitely getting their time out of me. But the flexibility in the job gave me the ability to be part of my kids' lives, be involved in their lives, and then still do this full-time job. And so that was awesome to have that. And just, yeah, the flexibility there was great.
And that's really refreshing to hear that you had that experience clearly pre-COVID then as well, because I think it's only really come to light sort of through COVID that actually we can be a bit more flexible. But it sounds as though you were kind of exposed to that earlier on, which is great to hear.
Yeah, it was not new.
So from I guess a business perspective then, what benefits do you think that businesses can see by encouraging more women in sales engineering positions?
I mean, I think there's a bunch of different skills that we bring to the table. I'll say diversity, but I mean it more in diversity in opinions, right? We all have different backgrounds. And so I think how we handle things, I think I was telling you a while ago that I had, when I first started as a sales engineer, I was on the government side, the federal government side. So
Mhm.
I would get pulled in, and I was a junior SE, I'm not going to lie. I'm going in and I'm getting pulled into meetings with generals and very high up. And I come in and this little girl, and hi, I'm going to teach you about, and the general's like, who are you? What are you? But what was interesting is I learned, like, don't underestimate me. And what I would do is I would say, okay, okay, you're strong, you're smart, you're go, go, go. And then I'd say, can I just ask one question? How are you doing? What are you doing? They'd say, well, I don't know. And I'd say, well, have you thought about X, Y, Z? And they go, I don't know. And you get their attention. And so it was something that I kind of learned to play my strength. Like I am, being this, I won't ever say mute because I'm never quiet, but understated. But having that to play that card and be able to play that card, like underestimate me, please go ahead and underestimate me because you have no expectations, but wait till I wow you. And so coming in like that, I also think that we bring different perspectives to the conversation, right? We're going to be looking at things from a different way. I also think how we handle things is different on our teams. I just see how some of the male bosses and my peers and things like that, and I've had males reporting, I mean, of course, reporting into me, and it's just different how we all handle things. And I think we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. And so what we tend to do, and my team, loves their, I'm like the mama bear for my team because I'm looking out, I'm fighting the fight for them and doing whatever I need to. And a lot of times I just feel like I am that mama bear. And, I don't think you'd ever hear a male boss saying, I'm your daddy bear, I'm protecting you. And so, again, for better, for worse, it's just a strength that I bring. And my team is very appreciative of all the work that I do to protect them and to help them.
Yeah, well, and that's the important thing is the diversity piece. So there are things that men will be able to bring that, of course, is going to be helpful and desirable and so forth. But no one wants a carbon copy, do they, of just the same man in every single role because you get no diversity of thought there whatsoever, and you need to leverage off people's different skill sets and experiences and their ways of thinking to be able to kind of be open to absolutely anything. I mean, pre-COVID, I wonder how many people would have or businesses would have thought, oh, actually, we can incorporate remote working. Probably not many at all. It was a huge shock to people, and maybe if they'd had different mentalities, and I mean, obviously this is talking on a much broader level because this
Yes.
was kind of across the world. That I'm sure everyone was going into an office all the time, but it just kind of poses the question: could things be done differently if there was, diversity of thought? Probably
So I'll
yes.
give you a great example. Speaking of which, at RSA, I met a peer who was fabulous. She's awesome. I love her. And we were talking, and her company. She was saying she had previously worked at a company where the CEO was surrounded by yes men,
Mm,
and when she joined the team, she was struggling because her natural inclination was to represent herself fairly and represent the truth. And she said it was a real struggle to speak up because the CEO did not condone, didn't encourage that. And so I think that's a really big facet, and maybe that's a bigger thing, but I think the fact that she picked up on that really quickly and is working through that, working around it, that's what diversity brings. Is you've got people, you don't want the people. Where was I reading something recently where they said, I want to know who the person that's going to say no to me. Like, that's the person I want to talk to. The person who says you can't. Like you were saying, I can't get a A. Well, guess what? I can. Um, guess what it's going to do? It's going to inspire. And so I was just reading a book where they were saying something along those lines. Like, I want to talk to the people who have say no, that kind of thing. Sorry.
yeah, no, don't worry, it's okay. Everyone's welcome, even all the dogs. No, it's very true. I think that people that are able to constructively provide challenge, that's where you're going to learn. You don't want someone to just say yes to everything and tell you everything's amazing, everything's great. Like you want to seek out yeah, it's great to have some, like affirmation in life, I'm sure. But to be able to actually have someone to provide honest feedback or honest challenge, as long as it's obviously, of course, with good intent, then
Exactly.
that's where you learn the most. So no, it makes total sense. Um, why then do you think, in your opinion, so for any females that are listening to this podcast and this episode right now, why should any woman listening consider a career in sales engineering? What are the aspects of your role that you absolutely love the most? I know you touched upon it in terms of in your space you get to deal with so many different people, but if you were almost going to sell a sales engineering role that you think a female should take on, what do you love the most about
So it's funny. I hope that was a pun intended. And I'm selling on sales engineers. Um,
it? Yes.
again, I love what I love most about this job is that I get to go out and talk to so many people and help them solve their problems. And
Mhm.
so it's like having a puzzle, several puzzles every day that you have to go and solve. And
Mhm.
so going in and talking to different customers with different issues and different situations that they're going on, and maybe some semblance of a problem they're trying to solve, but coming at it from very different ways. That's what we do. And so I love talking to people. So that's one aspect of it. My mom, when I first got into this role, she's like, "What do you do?" And my girlfriends all used to call me Chandler from Friends because
Oh, really?
nobody knew what Chandler did. So they're like, "Chandler, we have no idea what you do." But the best I could say to my mom is I said, "I'm a translator." I said, "There's people in the room who are technical and there are people who in the room who aren't. I am the one who translates between them as I'm solving a problem." And so, it's this wonderful, wonderful world where you're helping people understand to solve their problems.
Mhm. Yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
a therapist. I'm a therapist. No, I'm not.
No, makes sense. And I guess in your position then as a VP of Sales Engineering, um, is there anything that you can share about your role that you think women perhaps maybe they're not aware of that your role entails, but that you think should be to help encourage them to consider a path into sales engineering?
So, yeah, and this is again, I think there's a stigma, and I think there's a stigma with sales in general. And when you're in high school and when you're in, before high school, maybe even college, nobody ever says, I want to go into sales, right? And I
Mm.
don't think people realize in the world how important selling is. And it's funny because I've done tons of sales training, and then you sprinkle on the whole engineering aspect of it. But sales in general, it's such a different world out there. And I laugh because I talk to people about how often you use sales in your day. Whether you're trying to convince somebody, a police officer, not to give you a ticket, whether you're trying to ask for a bargain if you're shopping or something, a reduced price or something, or you're trying to get your kids to eat broccoli, right? You're constantly selling. And so it's a skill. And then again, to take it to that added level where you start talking about engineering and you're solving problems and you're building something. And so it's this, I just, it's funny. The people on my team don't like sales engineering. I've gone over the years where bosses have come and said, we are sales engineers. And then we're like, no, 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 we're solution architects. No, 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 we're solution consultants. No, we're security engineers. We go through so many different names because the second somebody puts sales on their name, they feel like it reduces your level of credibility. So for the engineers on my team, they really struggle with it. And so I go back and forth because truly we are sales engineers, right? We have to sell. That's a big part of what we do. Our numbers, the way we're motivated and paid and things like that, there's a faction of it that is tied to sales. But then there's that engineering facet where, again, you're learning, constantly learning, which is an awesome thing. I'll tell you, when I'm hiring somebody, I look for people who want to learn. And so to be constantly learning and sharpening and getting better, that's something that I love. And so, again, I think pulling that right brain, left brain, and being able to use all of your skills to do your job and just get better and better at it
Yeah,
is
that's
really.
I think the piece that you mentioned there as well about the sales piece, and perhaps when you know, put a rubber stamp of sales on something that you feel as though it diminishes your who you are. I think I shared with you when we met at RSA that when we were going round to, you know, taking a little look at all the booths and stuff, I at times felt as though I refrained from being very honest that I'm in the recruitment space because I felt as though people wouldn't want to have a conversation with me, don't have time to speak to a recruiter, not interested. You're going to try and I don't know, do whatever, XYZ, stick a resume in front of me. And it's like, no, no, like I'm genuinely here to understand what you guys do. I really want to immerse myself in this world and learn. And yes, my job is to help companies recruit and help candidates find amazing opportunities. And there is, of course, an aspect of selling in that. Um, but getting out of that kind of frame of mind that it diminishes me and my value and the value add that I bring was a little bit difficult. I have to admit, it was, yeah, I can totally kind of empathize with that way of thinking. I think it's because there is a stigma around sales or recruiters that, and I used to think that before I was in recruitment. I thought, oh my goodness, I don't like salespeople, I don't like recruiters, they're sharky, they're shady, they don't care about what they do. And it just, yeah, there are some people out there like that, but it couldn't be further from the truth. For those that genuinely care about what they do, it's a shame.
I'm a little biased, and I completely agree with you, by the way, because sales, I immediately go to used car salesman, right? It's like your first inclination when you think
Yeah.
sales. Like, no, no, no. But on the recruitment side, headhunters, but my mom was a head. I don't know if I told you that she
Oh
was a
no,
recruiter. And
no, I
so
did
she
not
owned her own
know.
business. So I grew up with a recruiter. So I grew up,
Okay.
yes, questions, asking questions at the dinner table. How would you answer this? How do you shake your hands? How do you? So I
Yeah,
have mad respect for the recruitment business.
that's amazing. What area of recruitment and was she recruiting in?
She was more executive level and more on the support staff, is what she did here in the
Right.
DC area. So a lot of political and stuff like that.
Amazing. Okay, that's great. So you've got first hand then of probably a lot of the people that she probably helped and the businesses that she helped and the way in which she conducted herself and so forth. And so you
I
see it
think
from
more
this
the
side.
skills, not the people, like because
Okay.
she hired for such a different facet, but just more of the what are the questions you're going to ask, when you're going for an interview and stuff like that. So those type of things, and more
Yeah.
helping with that.
Yeah, no, no, it's great. And salespeople have value and recruiters have value. Everyone brings something to the table. It's just the way in
Absolutely.
which you present yourself and, how you go about business and so forth. But you're right, so everyone needs sales. Let's face it, money makes the world go round. We can hate it and we can disagree with that, so, but it's very true. If you want to put a roof over your head and you want to put food on the table, you need to make money. And yeah, so makes
That's also one of the things, though, I do love about sales engineering is, and it was a tough thing to come to because not being coin operated, like, ultimately I want the best for my customers. I want the best
yeah.
for my team, right? I'm all about the end solution. But like you said, I also have to pay my mortgage and I also have to, get my kids to college. And so there's this whole coming to terms with that was a tough thing because I was not intrinsically a money motivated person. I was really more of the if you do a good job, you'll get rewarded appropriately. And so,
Mm.
which I guess kind of is sales, you bless you. Whoever
Oh,
that was.
did you hear that? Wasn't me. It was definitely someone else sneezing. All fun and games, but no, no, it's true. It's yeah, you have to be able to sell, and everyone needs to, as I said, put a roof over their head. And it's interesting when I have some conversations sometimes with some particularly tricky customers who I understand. They're very busy, but so is everyone. I always remind them, hey, what I'm doing is no different to what you would expect your sales rep to do. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So let's just come back down. But no,
That's awesome.
I guess lastly then, just to round everything off then, if I were to ask you to, if you were going to give one piece of advice that you want to leave us with, what would it be?
So, I mean, I have a couple I think that I've learned in my career. The first being, again, speak up. I think that's one of the things that I've definitely learned as I've come throughout, and having the confidence, probably having the wisdom and the experience has helped me with that tremendously. But I do think it's important. Don't ever feel scared to speak up. And I think, my dad used to say, "There's no such thing as a dumb question." So I think being able to speak up and having the confidence, I can't tell you how many times in college, or I'm in a room, and somebody's saying something and I'm like, okay, this does not make sense. And I'm looking around and everyone's nodding their heads and I'm like, I guess I'm the dummy in the room because I just don't get what you're saying. And so I'll say, hey, I got a question. And I'll ask the question and the person will say, oh, well, that's good. And they'll go. And all of a sudden I see everyone let out like an exhale, like,
Sigh. Hmm.
and I can't tell you how many times I've realized people are so scared because they don't want to look like a dummy. And I guess I don't care if I look like a dummy, but because I've done it. But having that confidence, or not even confidence, just like the not caring enough about what I look like to say I really want to be informed, and so I'm just like, hey, I got to ask that question. How many times it's benefited the entire room because nobody else would speak up. So that's one thing. The other thing I will say is networking. That's been the biggest part of my life, and I realize now, and especially my younger, there are people that I worked with now who are CEOs of company, and I did not back then take the chance to go up, shake their hands, get to know them. Or
Yeah.
just even, make an impression, hey, it's great working with, it's something to do where I can say I've had like a really good conversation with these high up people. And so if I were to go them, yes, I'm connected to them on LinkedIn, but they don't know me from Adam. And so
Yeah.
I wish I had done more networking and done things earlier with people who grew in their career because it's just so important. This world, the job market is all about, who you know. I think what you know is an aspect of it, but who you know is such a bigger part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's very valid advice. And just to your point on asking questions, I think that if you're the only one in the room that is raising your hand asking questions, you're far from a dummy. You're probably the smartest person to be asking things. Everyone else sat there thinking, yeah, okay, not learning. So
Thank you.
no,
Thank you.
no. And yeah, I think that networking is incredibly important, especially in today's world. Networking and personal branding and how you kind of put yourself out there, very, very important. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that brings up a really good point. I'll say a third thing. I have a third one.
yeah, yeah.
Advocating for yourself.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I didn't realize in a couple of jobs that I had earlier on. Again, I thought my credibility and my work would speak for itself, but it's amazing how often it doesn't. You're sitting in the back and it's just happening. People don't realize who's making it happen. And
Yeah.
so sometimes there's an element of it's okay to brag.
Yeah.
Or I worked with someone who had a brag file anytime anyone sent something positive, like you did a great job, you did this. They had a personal folder, like a me folder.
Yeah.
And they used it for a couple of reasons. First of all, when they were just having a really terrible day, like let's go in and look at something nice that somebody said about me. But then she also used it when it came time for reviews. Like, here are the things that people are saying about me. Here's the job that I'm doing. And so having that brag, in a really positive way,
Yeah.
it- folder and having the ability to talk about what you're doing is really important.
I literally just spoke about a having a brag board or whatever it is. I think it's on one of my other episodes. Might have been the last one. Obviously, you wouldn't, it's not been released yet, but it's interesting. So it is a thing. Literally having a log of stuff that you've done incredibly well that you can say, hey, look, here are my achievements. You're right, you need to, because no one else is going to be logging that for you. People are focused on themselves, so you need to have that there. And like you said, it's great for when days are tough, and let's face it, life's a roller coaster, it's always up and down. But for when days are tough, so you look through it and you think, you know what, I achieved that. I can do X, Y, Z. I am. When I was in the UK, I had bought myself, when I had like my first full year of billing, I bought myself a Cartier ring. Yeah, I'm not wearing it today
I
actually.
was
So
just going to say, do you wear
the
that with pride?
no, yeah. So the reason that I bought it, I told myself at the beginning of the year, I said if I exceed my target by X amount, I don't remember the numbers, then I'm going to treat myself to it. And every time I have a day where it's difficult or I think, how the hell can I do this? I'll look at the ring and reminded myself, well, if I bought myself this ring, then I can get through it. So yeah, not quite the brag book, but just having something symbolic like that, I think is very important.
Yours is better than a brag book because you can wear yours out to a bar or to a restaurant. I mean, I love this idea, and it's something that I will absolutely. Everyone needs to have a Cartier ring that they.
Yeah,
Everybody needs that. I love it. I love it.
yeah. No, well, look, thank you so much, Lara. It's been really great to have you on this episode, and I've absolutely loved speaking with you. So thank you so much,
Thank you.
and
It was wonderful.
yeah, and yeah, no, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure that we will speak very soon. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope that you found it inspiring and insightful. I will be releasing each episode of this series on a bi-weekly basis, so if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please keep your eyes peeled for the next release. I've loved having you here today and look forward to having you on the next one.